You are listening to the Faces for the Future podcast, a podcast dedicated to exploring the stories of young creatives. My name is Jacob Deere. I'm a documentary photographer, publisher, and visual artist, and I'm going to be sitting down with creators to listen to their inspiration, interests, and process, hearing the lessons they have learned and how they broke out of the mold. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Faces for the Future podcast. We're on episode 11. Episode 11 already. Flying through these. 2 a week. We're doing well, guys. We're doing well. And thank you for all the positive feedback and also sharing this podcast on social media. In this episode, I actually have a friend of mine who I met when I moved to Cheltenham. His name is David Shickell. He is a photographer currently studying Editorial and Advertising at the University of Gloucestershire.
Oh, I don't know. I suppose it's easy to go back to the start. I left school and I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And my grandfather and brother and I suppose influences of to me at the time was go and get a trade. It doesn't matter if you don't do it for the rest of your life. Go and get a trade. It's something you always fall back on, blah, blah, blah. So I was unable to get an apprenticeship at the time, and I went to college. And it was through a lecturer at college that I ended up getting an apprenticeship. Served an apprenticeship as a mechanical engineer, and I just stuck in that world for 20 years. It gave me an opportunity to travel the world. So it gave me a chance to experience and live abroad while working. I climbed the ranks, I gained all different skill sets, and I just got to a point where I was just ready for something fresh and new. Nothing was really happening, and I, cut a long story short, I had a breakdown. And it was like, well, I can't continue to do this anymore. So what am I going to do if I'm not doing this? And everyone kind of around me had commented on the photography that I do and stuff, because I used to take photograph of equestrian sports and things on the side just to keep my hand in with photography, really.
Have a creative outlet.
Not with the view of being professional, just to just something to do. Photography, on that note, is the only thing I've ever found in the world that when I'm in that moment of taking a photograph, the whole world just disappears around me. All my anxiety, all thoughts, everything just vanishes. The moment I come out of that, so it wouldn't stick for maybe a whole shoot, but certainly there's a fair chunk of time within that shoot where the whole outer existence doesn't bother me in any way. You know, I'm very focused and very fixed about what I'm doing, and it's the only thing I've ever found that's done that. So putting all these things together, I was like, right, okay, I don't know how photography works at the level I'd like to do, because I thought if I was going to do it professionally, what would I want to do? I knew that I didn't want to be a wedding photographer. I didn't really have any interests or hobbies that I thought, I want to photograph this and I want to, be a, whatever, skateboarding photographer or a music photographer or whatever. Because to me, I'm probably in the minority, and it's the science side of it that gets to me. So I'm quite technical, and it's quite that interests me. It's probably with being an engineer, but I'm more science-based than art-based. I'll come back to this later. But so for me, I was like, okay, I need to figure out how to do this, how to, A, communicate with the photography world. Definitely. And B, try and find a way to put some food on the table with it. So I tried initially doing things like portraits and stuff, and people were interested until you mentioned money.
Payment, yeah.
And I was like, yeah, this just isn't going to work. So I sat and researched about how I could sort of retrain. And I read something online, and as with most things online, you take it with a pinch of salt. And it said if you've never had a student loan before, as a UK citizen, you were entitled to one, or something along those lines.
Okay.
So I phoned up Student Finance England, and they said, yeah, you've never had a loan. We can pretty much, unless there's an obvious reason why not, then there's no reason why we wouldn't give you a loan to go and study and do what you wanted to do. So at that precise moment, that was sold. That was what I was going to do.
That's when the tick hit the checkbox.
Yeah, I found that I could get a maintenance loan, which would help towards living costs.
Yeah.
And then it was just a case of just finding a little part-time job just to make things tick over. So for me, that was the done deal, you know. And then I kind of, this happened in January, and then I had to wait till September. Yeah. So in January, I started applying through UCAS to all the different courses. And there was one course in particular that I always wanted from the research, and it was the editorial and advertising, because that was the world I wanted to go into. The research, I looked at who influenced me within photography and what they'd done, how they got there, how they made their money, what made them who they are. And it all comes from there. And then I set myself a goal. I was very big into self-help at the time.
Okay.
And I think it was Tony Robbins said, nice. Set yourself an out there challenge that you think is unachievable and just keep working at it every day. In a very crude way, but that was kind of what he was getting at.
Definitely.
So my goal was I wanted to be able to walk into the likes of W.H. Smith's at any time, and I would have an image in a magazine somewhere on the shelf, and that would happen whenever I walked in there. That was my ultimate goal.
Yeah.
Not that would put bread on the table, but that's photography.
No, but it's a personal goal.
I was like, right, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
I want to be known as a published photographer.
Yeah.
So this course was perfect for that because it had industry links. It was based around that world. So I researched everything I possibly could about the lecturers and everything on there. And then I went for my interview a couple of weeks later. And everybody's interview lasted about 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Mine went on for nearly 2 hours.
That's when you know you got your research right.
That's how things tend to go. But and I just knew from that point, this is where I'm meant to be. This is what I'm meant to be doing. And I kind of, in that moment, it was the first time that I ever gave myself permission in life to go and do something. Everything had always been for somebody else at that point.
Yeah.
So it was either, I've got to do this because I've got to provide this, or I've got to do this because such and such, or whereas this was the first time for me that I was like, no, I'm giving myself permission
to do this, to
go and do what I want to do. Which was such a big thing.
I could imagine, yeah.
Off we started in September.
I think it's really interesting you were saying about the technical aspects of photography, because that's one thing that I picked up on yourself when we first met, because I'm quite a technical photographer myself. I spent a fair amount of my early years in photography learning the technical aspects of cameras and flashes and how to best use them in best scenarios. And so when me and Dave actually met, it was a case of, I think we were talking about camera settings, and it was like we sort of just like connected over camera settings, and it sort of divulged off into that, which was really interesting actually. But the thing that I have seen is you've definitely taken on more of a style since the first time we met.
Really? See, that's something I know we've probably had endless conversations
I feel like
over
we
the
have.
past sort of year and a bit about this, but it's something I was hungry for. I was like, I need to know my style. What's my style? Well, I've got to have a style because all my idols had a style.
Yeah.
So you'd look at a photograph and you go, oh yeah, that's an Albert Watson, or you'd look at something, it'd be, oh yeah, that's Herb Ritts, or that's whoever. You know, that there was very much a key signature, and I was like, to make it, that's what you've got to have. Whereas, hopefully, I've matured somewhat, but now I look at it very differently. Like,
okay,
I'm not bothered about a style anymore. Now, maybe that style's come because I'm not bothered about it.
It might be that.
For me, I've decided to look at things a different way. Certainly since the start of this year, is that I've decided to look at it as a trade again. So as an engineer, you'd learn your rudimentary kind of basics, and then you apply those basics to it. So for me, that's how I'm looking at it. It's like, okay, well, I've spent all this time learning how to use these tools and this craft.
Okay.
Now, I want to go off and create. And that's where the frustration is for me now, because I'm sure every photographer would agree that it's immensely frustrating. But that's what the challenge is about it, right? Is that
definitely
that's where you go, whether it's a project that you need to try and work out how you're going to do, or research that you're going to get for that, or wherever. But for me, yeah, I think that was also the other thing, is that if I went into the editorial and advertising world, I'd be given briefs. It wasn't for me to kind of self-orchestrate. I could, it was kind of like, right, we want this. This is the price. This is where it is.
Definitely.
Blah, blah, blah. We'd like your style, and this input is how I'd understand it. Whereas now, I it's really weird. Like I don't look at iconic photographs singular anymore. So everything's about bodies of work for me now. So at the moment, I'm writing an essay about the in-depths of Migrant Mother, but it's nothing to do with that one photograph. It's
to
for me
do with everything else.
The other 5 that she took. And how that works together. And I think, obviously, at university, there's another course there, which is the documentary side. And I always saw that, that there was collections of photographs. And then one of my lecturers, an amazing inspiration, Matthew Murray, watching his work and his projects and speaking to him about them and learning that soon as you start adding more and more, how wild it gets. How big the body grows and how all its different interpretations can go many different ways. So
definitely,
I think the first year at university is like, I didn't know what to expect. Because school wasn't pleasant for me in any way, shape, or form. And I think that was the other thing with being an engineer. It was that I didn't have to be an academic. I could just sit and play with stuff and make things.
Make things work.
And that's how it was. So something was broken. Okay, why is it broken? This is why it's broken, or this is why it's causing this. You fix it, you get huge satisfaction. Look, it doesn't do that anymore. Me, blah blah blah. Whereas to walk back in and have to start writing essays and understanding what this was about and why that was there, that was really hard for me, I guess, and a culture shock. Because I never had to explain it before. It was just like, it doesn't work because. But I never had to explain how I knew that.
It's a completely different workflow.
It's a completely different field. However, I'm still very much of the opinion that I've done it right for me. I don't think I've been ready for university after school. I wasn't mature enough. I wasn't in the right place. certainly didn't have the confidence, and it just wasn't something that I think would have gone well if I did go.
Yeah.
Whereas I've kind of gone off and I've done a little bit and I've gained experience and learned life skills. Whereas now I'm for it. And I want to sit in the education arena for a while. I think, certainly it's not about qualifications.
No.
I'm quite interested in what a master's has to offer.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we can have a conversation about that.
Yeah, because obviously it's back to you then taking more control of yourself as an artist.
Yeah.
And that's very much where I'd like to go, because whether photography works out for me or it doesn't, I'm under no illusion how many people graduate a photography course and then go into baking cakes or something that's
different
not to do with photography. I'm well aware that that's out there, but there's just something deep in my gut that's been there since the first day of uni that this is meant to be for me.
And I think
all that hard slog is coming to an end. Like, I'm on the right path for me now. Definitely,
and I think a master's is definitely a good option to further one's thinking. The way I've been trying to think of studying, especially a creative subject, which in my opinion isn't the best way of being graded because it's a subjective form rather than objective. You can mark a maths essay or a maths question because you know the answer, but you can't necessarily mark an image because there is no answer. But that's a whole different topic. We won't go that way. Let's keep it on the track that I was trying to stay on. But for me, I try and look at it all as self improvement and self involvement as an artist, and especially at a master's level, it's much more about how you take everything that you've learnt, whether that be in photography or outside in life skills, and how do you implement that into work that you create. And it makes you think much more deeply about where I sit, where my work sits, and what can I create to help bolster those things. And I think the education system can be fantastic for people. It can, and I'd like to think that maybe I could, maybe I'm a result of the education. I know I'm a result of the education system, but it can be very difficult for people. As you said, maybe coming straight out of school, university wasn't a direction for you because it wouldn't have worked. And I think I was in a similar situation when I was young. I think most of my family and friends would say that the idea of me studying at that time was something they wouldn't have ever thought of, and now I'm sat here after nearly 10 years of it. But in that, there's been a hell of a lot of self-development, and I think for yourself, especially as you're still somewhat early in your development in the education system anyways, 2 years on a undergrad is still very early in a development of oneself as an artist and maybe even a person. I think it could be really interesting to see yourself taking this new mindset going forward in other directions. Yeah, totally. I think as well, to touch back and not deviate too much, but I think it's learning new parameters, like, as you said, how do you teach creativity? I think that's the thing, isn't it? You have to, ultimately, it has to be successful or unsuccessful. Yeah. But it's by what do you grade that against? But I think my big frustration at the moment is that I think photography for me is about saying something to the world. So it's a way that anyone who takes a photograph is saying something, whether it's documenting a moment in time or a person or whatever, or it's saying to the world, look, there's an issue with this, or this is a real good thing. We need more of this. It's affirmation or whatever. I think, how many photographers actually have something to say though? Yeah, it's a good question to ask. I think that's the difference for me, and that's what I'm kind of looking at the moment. Is
Are the successful photographers, and when I say successful, I don't mean famous. I just mean people that have created bodies of work for quite a while, and people relate to it. Is it because they have opinions on things? And certainly for me, I found that how everyone has an opinion on things in this day and age, but nobody wants to voice it
unless it's on Facebook.
Yeah, but then is that their opinion, or is that an opinion to get them validation?
Potentially, yeah. No, I think it's really interesting with that, with regards to sort of creating those bodies of work and being an artist with an opinion. I think especially in the world of documentary work, I think it is very important that the photographer or the artist, depending on what medium, has an opinion of what they're making. But one of the things that I sort of learned whilst on my masters, and it's sort of stuck in my head now, and I don't think it will ever go away, is that when you're capturing an image, you may be documenting something, but the question you need to ask yourself is, what are you actually telling? So what is this 6x6, 6x7, whatever frame actually telling, and is it needed? I work in the world of books and exhibitions, primarily books at the moment, but so making a sequence for a body of work is very important because you need images to work back and forth to tell the story. So before I even take an image and I see a composition or I see something I want to document, I'm questioning not only why I'm taking it, but what is it for? Is it for me? Is it for the story that I'm telling you? And these are all questions you sort of learn over time, I feel.
Yeah, completely. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? That, as I said, I look at photography now as a craft, in the sense of a craftsman or a person.
Definitely.
I don't want to offend anyone out there.
Don't go down that road.
But yeah, it's a craft, so it's kind of, it's using that craft, and it's how you use it.
And I think it comes from a technical base as well. It's understanding the technical aspects.
For me, it is. I know I'm in a minority, and people may say that it's quite an amateur take. But for me, ultimately, photography is recording light.
Yeah.
So there's no if, buts, or maybes. That's all it is.
Well, that's what the sensor sees.
So that's what it is. So for me, it's understanding how to do that. But you can only do that when you are technically proficient. Can you then take that forward and say, okay, this is how I'm going to create this to say this? Definitely. For me, that's where it has to be.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Then there are other. You hear of, I won't mention any names, but quite famous photographers that are quite open and say, I don't know what settings are. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what.
I think there's.
That is like really, and then you kind of realise that they probably did at one time, but because they work in such big production teams, that's not their job anymore.
No, their job is the vision.
I don't know. I just think there's something very much beautiful about understanding how things work and kind of putting your own signature on that.
Definitely. I think, when I was on my BA at Bath, one of the lecturers there asked us the question, I'm sure you've heard of the photographer, but Gregory Crewdson. I think it's Gregory Crewdson. Crewdson. Yeah, who creates these fantastic these one-off sort of, they're basically paintings with images. It's really, really interesting. If anyone's listening or watching, make sure you go check out Gregory Crewdson's work. But we found out, well, it's common knowledge that he doesn't actually even press the shutter release on the camera. So the question we were asked is he the photographer? And the whole class was very much divided, if I remember correctly at the time, very much divided between yes and no. And for me, I said, if I remember right, I said something along the lines of, yes, he is the photographer because he is the one with the vision. And at the end of the day, it's the vision that makes the image. The technical prowess is very important, and understanding that. And I don't know his technical abilities. They might be monumental or they might be minuscule. I don't know. But as long as you understand how to make the image, you can then use that vision to create it.
Yeah, completely. I think, that applies to anything for me across the board, though, although you don't need to be an artist to paint.
No.
The chances of the average person with no art understanding painting something and having it put up in a gallery is probably quite slim. But yeah, it's the art side of it is something I really want to pay a lot more interest to, because obviously there's always new things to learn and technically and stuff. But for me, I feel I'm ready now for that kind of appreciation. Hopefully the two will then amalgamate and the work will change again. But I don't know, with regards to going back to earlier to style, I'm just not sure if style's a good thing anymore, because does that then mean that you are then stuck to that work? You have to be known for that style for here on ever.
Yeah.
Or, if you were to change your style, would you then be critiqued? As in, what happened there? Kind of. I just think, if it is a fluid, art, then why was I so hungry to put myself in a box in that sense, but I think that's from understanding and seeing in the outer world what we deem is successful. But then again, I'm also, we've had many conversations about this, but I'm not sure if the way I work at the moment is right for me either, because Photoshop's a huge scare for me. Okay, I've skills are growing and I'm learning to be more adept with it, but it's not photography then. It's graphic design for me.
Yeah, it starts crossing a boundary.
That's not the world that I wanted to step into. And I think there's still something, very organic about analog. Unknowingly, in the 80s, there wasn't that option, So for me, I just think that it's something that I've got to learn because of technology and sign of the times, but it's not a format that I think I'll embody forever. So then my style would change anyway.
Definitely. And I think that's really interesting, style can pigeonhole us quite easily, I think. For me, I'm finding myself shooting a lot of similar stuff ever since finishing my BA and spending a lot of time trying to understand what my style is. I now seem to shoot in a very similar style, like Treasure Island is my style. That's how I shoot. And I'm really trying at the moment, especially to try and break out of that mold a little bit. So I've started shooting a lot more black and white, using flash on the camera, trying to challenge when I shoot during the day, so different lighting conditions. So this is all somewhat technical in some aspect, I suppose, and with that, I'm starting to see different changes in the way that I see the world and I see people. And obviously at the moment with lockdown, the world's rather different anyways, which helps in some aspects. But no, it's interesting you say that, in that you don't know if your style's going to change again. It could, it probably will. And that's good to understand and sort of know that it will, because you can be much more accepting to it. And
what's made you want to change your style from Treasure Island? What?
It's a good question. I don't think I necessarily want to change my style. I think I want to get better at working in different areas, and being able to create images in different styles easier. Because I ended up becoming, medium format camera on a tripod, or with a cable release, setting up my shots, or and shooting a lot of 5x4, and everything was very set up in the sense of that question that was in my head is, why am I taking this, was very much in the forefront of one's mind, which made me question why I was taking those images. So it made me think much more about the style that I was taking in to better match images for the book and the exhibition that came after. But I think moving home has made me really try and refigure and approach the images that I make, because Burnham is a very small town compared to say Gloucester, and it's very easy just to make the same image over and over in certain contexts, certain styles and lights. And I noticed the first time I went out with the camera here, when I moved home, I shot a roll of Kodak Color Plus, got it dev'd and scanned, and I looked back at it, I was like, I made those images in 2017. They're exactly the same. What am I doing? And so I started looking at I can't remember their names now. Quite current sort of photography work at the moment, in the sense of a lot of people are very inspired by Martin Parr again. So that very slapstick, not slapstick, but that very sort of direct flash. Need to pick my words better. And so I started playing with direct flash, and then black and white sort of came into it because Mike, yourself knows Mike, my partner at Coverless, has started developing black and white film. So it was a case of, oh cool, I can get it dev'd literally down the road from me and get it back within a few days. So started developing how to use black and white, and I think I'm still questioning why I might be changing my style, or at least trying to adapt or learn new ways of approaching work. But I think there's no harm in doing it.
Certainly, I think that was the reason for me going to some landscape work as well. And that how it came about is Alex, I think you met Alex. We were in work one day, and he just said, "Why don't you come shoot some landscapes?" And I was like, "No, thanks. It's not something I want to do." Like, why would I want to? Like, I was totally closed off to it. Totally like, I don't need you influencing me. I've got my own agenda, blah blah blah. And it just sat and played on my mind all day. And I was like, "What have I got to lose? Like, just go out, do it. Why not?" Like, and the real thing was, I same as anything. If I was going to do it, I was going to do it properly. Rightly or wrongly, went and invested a fair amount of money, bought some filters and all the other carry on that has to go with it, And we just went down to the Severn Bridge. And I just sat there and I was like, okay, it's a bridge. Like, what? How am I going to, okay, let's start playing about with basic composition and see if there's something there. And I just sat on a rock and I was just like, this is actually quite nice. Like, I don't have someone to engage with in regards as a portrait. There's a space here for me to just be me.
Definitely.
It didn't end up too successful. But it was a nice change. So I was like, oh, right, okay, so I'm going to keep having a little bash at this. And then I was chatting to one of my lecturers in university, and he opened me up something I've never heard of before, which was psychogeography, which is very much about you photographing how somewhere makes you feel, as opposed to what is actually in front of you.
Interesting.
So if you go to anywhere, and rather than going, right, okay, how am I going to compose this and blah, 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 you just say, how does this make me feel? All the elements that you'd originally trying and capture dissipate.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay. And then you've got the challenge, if something makes you feel particularly angry, how do you do that if it's a hot sunny day, Because the other side of that is you've then got that to do. But back to the skill set, we can all create anything, anywhere, at any time. And for me, it was just such a change because it was like, right, okay, what is that? And certainly there's a shot there from Swanage of an old pier. And I purposely went this time to get that photograph.
Okay.
And we arrived in Swanage, and we had a little visit around Dorset anyway. We went to Durdledore before, and then kind of had a few iconic places and had a look around. Nothing much was happening photographically wise. It was like, oh, here we go again. When is this banger going to arrive? Okay, I've got it. We went and got some fish and chips and sat on the front, and there was a dog playing and the beach and stuff. And I just sat there and I was like, I feel really like peaceful and content. And I was like, right, that's what I'm going to go and shoot then.
Interesting, yeah.
That pier is ideally before I'd have like waves crashing and such drama.
Yeah.
Where they know this was like sereneness, right?
So
and that's what I wanted from it. So that's something else, and I'm trying to take that into portraits now, actually, because it's interesting that if I was to take your portrait, for instance, there's an underlying rule that I should try and make you look, as well as I could.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if that's really the professional attitude. Certainly there's a hero of mine, and there's a story. I don't know how much of it is true. I've heard various ones, but Chris Floyd, and he had the opportunity to shoot Paul McCartney.
Okay.
Paul McCartney's his hero. However, to get the shot he wanted, he had to annoy him to get the expression and everything that he wanted from him. And you kind of wonder, like how he was through that, in that he's meeting his all-time idol, but yet he's piss him off to get what he wants from him. And that's when I was like, do you know what? I just haven't been putting enough attention of emotion into my images at all. In fact, it's something I've not really considered because I've been so fixed on the technical side of stuff. Like, oh no, that 2 strands of hair shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
That means I've got to go to Photoshop now, and I've got to. Whereas now for me, it's very much like, what am I getting here? What is it? And I think this is coming back to what I said, is about having something to say,
That's really interesting to hear that yourself is having somewhat of a shift in not only the production, but the thought pattern behind the images you're making. And, with that in mind, are you, obviously I know being in lockdown makes it a bit more tricky, but are you sort of making stuff? I know that recently you're looking...
at the moment, I've got this idea of trying to photograph key workers.
Okay.
The idea, the end story is I'd like to make a little book, and then that can go out to be sold, and money can go to charity for whatever. It's also to document it, because I think it's something that's going to be in history forever. You look economically what's happened, regardless of the amount of deaths and everything, all aspects and facets of life at the moment, it's going to be noted in history later. It's going to be something we're going to look back on. However, I also notice every other photographer doing the same.
Yeah.
So part of me is like, do I really want to do this? Is this me feeling compelled to go and do it? But if I'm not, what am I doing?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So, at the moment, that's something I've had a little bit of interest from. and that's something I'd like to continue working. So if anybody hears this and would like to be part of it, feel free to get in touch. But yeah, for me, it's very much it's time to start working with bodies works as opposed to just single images. And I think, it's just, as much as it's nice for me, it'd be nice to create something and give to somebody else from that.
Definitely.
So, yeah, that's something I'm looking at. But at the same time, I don't want to keep it too rigid, because it may evolve into not just key workers, but into, I think there's a lot more still to come from COVID, in the sense of, the people are being made redundant now, and there's a lot more, I think, to happen to people. Not to put a downer on it, but I think there's a lot more.
Yeah.
We're not out of this yet. So I don't want to keep it too sort of rigid, but I think we can all be grateful for what the key workers have done to go out and try and keep society ticking over. So, but then I noticed there's probably about 30 other people on a Facebook feed doing the same thing. So
I know it's
not that I think it's going to be the only book out there and do that. But yeah, for me, I think it's just now we're at a point where it's safe to be going back out and photographing people from a distance.
Safe.
Yeah, why not? And just promote. To me, it's about promoting isolation a little bit in that. So whether that be sort of photographing them in cars, to promote that, or indoors, or wherever. But that's there. But I think this is my stumbling point of where I'm at the moment. Is I don't know what to say at the moment. I think I've got, it's back to that thing. I've got a lot of opinions, but what do I actually want to put in the arena?
Yeah.
To say, this is from the heart. This is what I think, and this is and we should be.
And it's a question of what am I portraying to the world? That's no matter how big one's following might be on social media, or just who reads their books, whatever it might be. It's what am I portraying as me? As an artist, you're putting your name to it, so you have to think why you're doing that, and it goes back to that question why, which I think might be a common theme of all of this. But it sounds like a really interesting project. I think the fact that you have a baseline and kind of where you want to start, that's what matters right now.
Yeah, I think for me it's still at the moment I'm very driven to go and recreate something like Avedon's American West, in a sense of a strong portrait, a bit of a handwritten note from anybody and everybody. Not that you have to be somebody to be part of it.
Definitely.
The work is as a portrait artist is really influential to me. I'm not quite sure, if I want to go down the whole putting a white screen behind people and taking the studio out there. But for me, that idea of just, for me, ultimately, I want to tell people stories. I'd like to think I'm a bit of a people person at some points, but yeah. And I think that comes from me not feeling like I've ever been good enough to have my story told.
Okay.
That's what the driver is that I want to give you a vehicle to express your story.
Yeah.
So for me, a portrait session isn't about, let's just have a 5-minute, take a photo here, there and there.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, let's have a cup of tea, let's have a chat, let's find out what your story is, what whatever, and then I'll photograph you in the way I see that, as opposed to what you'd like me to photograph.
Definitely,
is probably more of how it would go down. But yeah,
well, although I feel like we could talk about this subject for hours, I think we're gonna have to call it time. But yeah, if I would love to sort of get you back on, because there's so many more things we can sort of discuss, and hopefully we can do that in person very soon. But to everybody listening or watching, where can they sort of find your work?
Yeah, so at the moment, I don't have a website at the moment. So I've got a domain, but it's just that's harming. So the best place really is just Instagram.
Okay.
My Instagram is David Shickell. And there's probably the best place right now.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, no, thank you ever so much for giving some time and hopping on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me on. It's a pleasure.
So that is it for episode 11 of the Faces for the Future podcast. I want to send a massive thank you to David for being on this show and sharing some really interesting insights into his work and also how he got to studying and becoming a photographer. Whilst you're on social media, if you could also go follow David and show some love and support to his work, that would be absolutely fantastic. And if you're not following us already, if you could pop over to our Instagram page, which is at FFTF podcast, Faces for the Future podcast, and give it a follow as well, it would be amazing. Hope everyone is enjoying their Saturday so far, and we'll be back very soon.